They told me churches were built as sanctuaries, places where the weary soul might find peace beneath vaulted ceilings and golden glass, but I learned, too late, that some were made instead to echo, to reverberate, to collect voices and trap them like insects in amber, and when I stepped foot inside that forgotten mountain chapel to digitize its ancient reel-to-reel recordings, I didn't find hymns or hallelujahs. I found voices that screamed through the seams of the earth itself, begging to be let loose, not for salvation, but for blood. They told me not to listen to the tapes, that some songs aren't sung for ears like ours, that some melodies weren't composed by human minds or guided by earthly hands, that when the choir sang back then, the air changed, thickened, pulsed with rhythm instead of oxygen, and that the chapel we recorded in never felt clean again. And I, naive and eager for obscure audio work in the backwoods of Pennsylvania, thought all of it was small-town superstition, dust-cloaked paranoia from senile men with too many unspoken memories. But then I pressed play, and the walls began to bleed, and I swear to you on everything I've ever loved, the voices that filled my headphones were not human. It was a freelance gig I found through a message board that hadn't been updated in years, buried beneath spam ads and outdated software patches. A request from someone calling themselves simply Sexton M, offering $5,000 to anyone willing to transfer and digitally preserve a collection of choral recordings from the 1950s, stored in a decaying chapel atop Carrion Hill, a stretch of tree-choked Pennsylvania land that didn't even show up on most GPS software and required manual coordinates to locate. The road was more of a spine than a path, narrow and bone-white, flanked by trees that pressed so tightly against my windows that I swear I heard branches scraping like fingernails along the car, whispering secrets in a tongue that sounded like breath through broken reeds, and when I arrived, the chapel looked less like a place of worship and more like a structure that had birthed something foul into the world and then tried to contain it. The walls sagging, the windows blackened, and a rusted iron cross on the steeple that leaned at an angle, as if the heavens themselves had tried to tear it free. Inside, the air smelled of mold, incense, and something else, something too metallic and meaty to be anything other than blood, long dried and scrubbed at until the scent had stained the stone itself. And tucked away behind the altar was a rotting wooden door with a plaque that read, Recording Studio, Do Not Enter Without SANCTFICTON, in peeling gold leaf, the word, Sanctification, scratched deep like someone had tried to gouge it away with a knife. I should have left. I should have called the number back and told them I couldn't find the place. But $5,000 was $5,000. The room was cramped and damp, with thick velvet curtains yellowed from age, and a reel-to-reel recorder still intact, surrounded by dozens of reels labeled with black ink, Midnight Choir, Session 1, Session 2, and the last one, buried beneath all others, Final Sermon, Do Not Play. The moment I slid in the first reel, the machine groaned like something inside was resisting, and the instant the tape began to turn, the world narrowed. The light in the chapel dimmed, the soundproof walls seemed to swell outward, and what came through the headphones was not a song, not a hymn, but a sound like dozens of mouths breathing at once, exhaling slowly, wetly, in rhythm. Then came the voices. Layered. Off-key. Discordant. Voices singing about mouths sewn shut and flesh turned into parchment and music notes burned into skin. And though I pulled the headphones away, the music didn't stop. It bled into the room, thick as fog, vibrating through the floor, and in my peripheral vision, I thought I saw the shape of a man, tall, robed, faceless, standing behind the curtain, swaying to the beat, humming along with no lips to form sound. That night, I tried to sleep in my car, parked at the edge of the cemetery that surrounded the chapel like a moat of forgotten sins, and the air was colder than it should have been, even for early fall. The wind cut through the trees like a blade, and every few minutes, I thought I heard the crunch of dry leaves, like footsteps that paused whenever I moved. At 3:13 a.m., my eyes snapped open, not to a noise, but to a pressure, like something thick and wet was crawling across my chest. And outside, in the thin light of the moon, stood 12 figures in the cemetery, each one dressed in long, tattered choir robes, each one perfectly still, and each one with a head that didn't match the rest of their bodies. They were bald. Pale. Featureless. No eyes. No nose. Only a massive, gaping mouth stretched far beyond what the human jaw allows, open wide in a frozen, silent scream. Or maybe it wasn't silent at all, maybe the music had simply tunneled so deep into me that my ears no longer heard the world as it was, only as it was becoming. Then, one of them raised a hand. It pointed directly at me. And every other figure turned to face me in unison, their mouths beginning to move, even though no sound came out, just the awful sucking motion of a chorus preparing to inhale the world in a single, eternal verse. When morning broke, I did not leave. I don't know why. I told myself it was for the money, for the integrity of the job, for pride, but the truth was that I couldn't. The road behind me had vanished. Literally. Where the gravel path had once carved down the hill, there was only forest now, dense, ancient, breathing forest, and every tree leaned just slightly inward, toward the chapel, like they were waiting to hear something again. Inside, I found the hymnal. It had not been there the day before. It rested on the altar, bound in something too thin to be leather and too rough to be cloth, with pages yellowed and creased with what looked like fingernail scratches and water damage that smelled faintly of bile. The notes weren't written in ink. They were carved. Etched into the parchment with something jagged, the staves crooked, the clefs inverted, and at the bottom of every page, the same instruction, sing in thirteenths. One must always be absent. I didn't understand. Not then. But when I turned around, the old tape machine had activated itself, and the final reel, "Do Not Play," was spinning, the sound oozing from its speakers in pulsing waves that didn't just vibrate the air, but throbbed inside my skull. I followed the sound. Downward. Beneath the altar. Through a trapdoor I hadn't noticed before, now gaping like a mouth carved into the earth, and the stairs beneath were soft and slick, as if worn down not by shoes but knees, and as I descended, the music grew louder, more alive, and I realized the song wasn't on the tape anymore. It was coming from below. The crypt was massive. Lined with pews and bones, walls stitched with broken violins and microphones wired into mummified skulls, the floor layered with wax melted from 1,000 long-dead candles, and at the far end stood a pulpit fashioned from jawbones, on which stood him, the choirmaster. He was tall, stretching beyond what the ceiling allowed. His arms too long, fingers like cello bows, and his head was a mass of exposed muscle and glistening cartilage, with no eyes, just a slit across his face like a speaker grill, from which the song flowed like breath, thick and black and full of static. He raised his hand. I screamed. But it came out as a note. A perfect C. And I realized, to my horror, that my throat was vibrating on its own. I don't remember agreeing. I don't remember signing anything. But I woke up on the floor of the chapel, with blood drying around my mouth and hands, and the hymnal opened beside me to a page I didn't recognize, one titled Rebirth Aria, version 13, and when I blinked, the pews were full. The choir had returned. 12 of them. All staring with mouths open, robes clean now, voices ready. They were waiting on me. I opened my mouth. And I sang. I sang until my lungs tore. Until my jaw cracked. Until my vision turned to fractals of noise and shadow and teeth. And I realized, far too late, that I had become the final note in their cursed harmony. Now I sit beneath the chapel. Still singing. Always singing. And the tapes are out there, copied, distributed, uploaded, and every time someone plays them, I feel them. New voices. New mouths. New vessels. Don't listen. For the love of your soul, don't listen. If you ever find a reel-to-reel tape marked Midnight Choir. If you ever hear faint singing through the static of a lost track, if a hymnal appears on your doorstep written in notes that slither rather than sit, burn it immediately. Do not listen. Do not digitize it. And above all, do not hum along, because the choir is always one voice short, and they're patient.